This is the most thought-provoking piece of Star Wars media that I have ever come across. Knights of the Old Republic 2 touches on all the core concepts of Star Wars: Jedi, Sith, the Force, and its division into a dark and a light side, and deconstructs them in the most beautiful and elegant way. It's a tale as old as the galaxy itself. A story about good and evil, about conflict, war, and the trauma it brings. It's a story about wounds. This game discusses a number of mature themes with just the right amount of tactfulness as to not derail into the dark edginess that other games with a similar ambition so often fall victim to. What is the Force? Well, when you are a Jedi or a Sith, being linked to the Force is the core of your very existence. When the Force flows through you, you are connected to all life around you. You can feel the presence of sentience. You can sense their aura, maybe even read their minds. If the Force is strong in you, you can feel its flow. You feel it in yourself, the room you are in, the building, the city, the planet, the galaxy. And not only do you feel it, but you can use it, manipulate it, or be manipulated by it. Either way, being Force sensitive means peering behind the veil, seeing and doing what others cannot. It simply puts you on another plane of existence. So, what does it mean to be cut off from the Force? Knights of the Old Republic 2 puts us in the shoes of one who has experienced just that. We play as a former Jedi who defied the authority of the Jedi Council by going to war. We are driven into exile by that council for our disobedience, our honor tainted, and our connection to the Force severed. A terrible punishment indeed. We travel the galaxy as a shadow of our former self, a deeply traumatized war veteran, as much cut off from the Force as we are cut off from ourselves. This is a game about healing. Within the first moments we play as the exile, something stirs within us, a familiar feeling, a memento of former greatness, and an open wound. The Force returns to us, and we hear its echo once more, if only a faint one. Throughout the game, we re-establish our connection to the Force. We shape it and are shaped by it. It is our primary objective to become whole again, to heal. We do this by uncovering the secrets of the past. What made us defy the Council's call to caution and go to war against the Mandalorians? Was it simply because that war-hungry clan of warriors posed a serious threat to the Republic and the galaxy as a whole, or was there more to it? Did we join the other renegade Jedi in battle because we believed in a just course, or were we perhaps always lusting for war? And when we were cut off from the Force after facing the Council's judgment for our defiance, was that all there was to it? Or was there something else? We seek answers for these questions, and as we travel along the outer rim of the galaxy, we find them. Bit by bit, we find ourselves again. We are not the only ones in need of healing. The consequences of the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War that followed it can be felt everywhere in the galaxy. Whether it be the companions in our party, the settlers on Dantooine, or the refugees on Nar Shaddaa, people are suffering, hurt, and broken. It is our choice to mend the suffering or to exploit it for our own personal gains. Perhaps even by offering a helping hand, all we do is increasing their helplessness, cheapening the little victories they could have achieved on their own. In either case, interacting with the world and its people will define us, make us whole again, one way or another. But we must always consider the consequences of our actions and the impact they will have on the galaxy. This is a game about reflection. When is war justified? Under what circumstances is it the right choice, the moral choice, to take up arms against an enemy threat? In Knights of the Old Republic II, we learn a lot about the Mandalorian warrior culture and the war they waged on the Outer Rim for more than a decade. We learn about the people they oppressed, the lives they took, the planets they set aflame. We see the devastation they brought, and yet, one can argue that what followed this war was an even larger catastrophe for the galaxy. When the Jedi Revan and Malak formed an army to face the Mandalorians in battle, their hearts may have been in the right place, but the fires of war kept on burning. Upon defeating the Mandalorians, Revan, Malak, and their followers turned on the Republic, taking the fight to their former allies, Jedi against Jedi, the Jedi Civil War. This conflict left its bloody mark on the galaxy for years, for decades to come. It destroyed the surface of Telos. It left Dantooine, the seat of the Jedi Council, in ruin. It led to countless casualties of war and created the largest homelessness and refugee crisis the galaxy had ever faced. And it all started with the Mandalorian Wars, a conflict you took part in. You carry responsibility for the lives lost and the ravaging of worlds. How do you deal with the sins of the past? And how do you go on? People all around the galaxy are dealing with these questions. On Onderon, another planet drowned in conflict, the aftermath of decades of war is almost palpable. Onderon is on the brink of yet another civil war. Royalists who defend the current rule by Queen Talia stand against the separatists led by General Vaklu, a war hero and charismatic leader of the Onderon military. As it's so often the case in these scenarios, the civil population is caught between the fires. There are riots in the street. Free speech is actively undermined by military forces, lies and propaganda are spread via the media. People openly spread their racism against the Beast Riders, an ethnic group that was marginalized and driven out of the capital Isis hundreds of years ago. This is the political climate when we enter the planet. Given everything we learned so far, it is now our task to reflect on the past and help shape the future of this planet. Do we join in the riots in the streets, or strike them down with an iron fist? Perhaps there's a third path, a path of neutrality and inaction. Do we support the Queen who wishes to keep strong ties to the Republic, or do we offer our aid to the usurper who wants to break free and establish a new rule? The choice is ours. And again, we have to ask ourselves, what is the right choice? What is the Jedi way? What is the Sith way? This game is a deconstruction. Before playing this game, I had a very basic understanding of the world of Star Wars. I had watched the movies and I played the first Knights of the Old Republic, but I never considered myself a fan of the franchise. Thus, I never dug all too deep into the lore, rules, and philosophy of this universe. For me, the stakes were pretty clear. The Force is a sort of magical supernatural power that permeates the galaxy. It is dichotomous in nature, separated into light and dark, and depending on which side you fall on, it can be used for good or evil. The Jedi are the guardians of the light side, They embody wisdom, caution, enlightenment, and, ultimately, good. The Sith, on the other hand, are harbingers of death, of destruction and evil. They only serve themselves and would have the galaxy wiped if it suited their lust for power. An intricate science fiction world, but with simple rules and a clear division into good and evil. Knights of the Old Republic II calls all of that into question. It presents a world in which Jedi have caused the death of millions by their inaction. A world in which other Jedi turned on their comrades and engulfed the galaxy in a bloodbath unlike anything that came before. Naturally, the common people, not sensitive to the Force, start to become skeptical towards the Jedi teachings and can hardly distinguish between them and the Sith. After all, what does it matter if a warmonger calls himself a conqueror or a liberator? In the end, people die. In the end, worlds fall. And it's not just the common folk who struggle with the so-called natural order of things. It's a crisis of conviction that affects everyone in the galaxy who has seen war, who has seen what Jedi are capable of in times of conflict. Even within the Council, the highest administrative body of the Jedi Order, there is dissension regarding what the best course of action is. And within the Order, many have forsaken the teachings, have paved a new way into the unknown, at the fringes of the dark and the light side. We have to find our way as well. Do we follow the Jedi Code, or become what we once were, a guardian of light, a paragon of justice and honor? Or do we give in to our passions, the lust for power, hatred, and domination, and become a Sith Lord like the ones buried at Korriban? Or do we settle somewhere in between on the wide spectrum that is the Force? Our actions and decisions shall shape us once more, and the ones around us. Ultimately, this is a game about bonds. When we walk the surface of the smuggler's moon, Nar Shaddaa, we see the people who pay the price when the galaxy is at war. It is a place filled with the less fortunate, the refugees and the homeless. It is a world dominated by crime, by gangs of the Syndicate who hold the population in a tight grip. As we traverse this miserable place, there are a number of opportunities for us to show kindness. Even though it is quite clear that most people don't have much to give us in way of reward, it is up to us to make the empathetic choice to help. By listening to their sorrows, by offering aid for their pleas, we form bonds with the people and the world around us. It is the same with our companions that travel with us on this journey. I don't think I'm going to forget this rugged band of misfits anytime soon. Each character in our party is more than meets the eye. Yes, even the droids. The more time we spend with each one, the more we get to know them and learn about their pasts, their beliefs, their own traumas, and demons they carry with them. While in the first Knights of the Old Republic, most party members were somewhat forgettable with only a few exceptions, these guys here are some of the most relatable, fleshed out, and believable characters I've ever seen in an RPG of that kind. I had so many awesome interactions with them, and it's truly impressive how much optional content is hidden in these endless dialogue trees. Entire cutscenes even. It's such a cool idea to have our own alignment with the Force impact our relationship with these characters and directly impact their personality as well. And not only do they interact with us, but with each other. A plethora of scenes play out on board the Ebon Hawk, our ship and base of operations for the game. I would even say that sometimes the game goes a little too far here. There are moments where, upon boarding the Ebon Hawk, up to 5 different scenes are played in succession. The game queues those up when we haven't been on the ship for some time and then spits them out all at once. But still, even if that can be overkill at times, it makes the ship and the crew feel alive and real. I have definitely formed a bond to these characters, and I will hold them in my memory for quite some time, if not forever. Besides its thematic richness, Knights of the Old Republic 2 is still a game. So, how does it play? Well, roughly, that's how. At its core, this is a real-time action RPG with pause. We take control of 3 characters at a time, each with their own set of attacks or feats, items, and if available, force abilities. We click on enemies, choose an action, and watch it all play out. In the background, the game rolls a 20-sided dice, a d20, which determines the significance of certain player attributes by adding modifiers based on this roll. This system is pretty archaic and feels somewhat out of place for a non-D&D game, but considering where Obsidian Entertainment, the studio behind this game, are coming from, it totally makes sense to see something like this here. I don't have any gripes with the core combat system. I'm familiar with old BioWare and Black Isle titles, and I'm quite fond of D&D. However, how the combat is designed around the system can only be described as clunky, which is for the most part due to the horrendous companion and enemy AI. These guys can't help but running into mines that were detected before, blowing themselves and the rest of the party into smithereens. They also love to run close to the enemy while holding a gun, to perform a ranged attack that is rendered pretty useless due to the close distance. The pathfinding is absolute garbage. Characters just keep on running into each other, having their hitboxes collide and blocking their way. The game sometimes straight up refuses to aim at the enemy of the player's choice and locks onto some random other guy. It's a mess. It's jank. I love it. Seriously, some encounters become all about that jank and how to use it to your own advantage. So you start running behind pillars, messing with the enemy AI, getting in and out of combat so you have time to heal, or pulling single enemies from a group so you can take them on one by one. Sometimes this is the only way to succeed, for the game has insane difficulty spikes. I played on normal difficulty, and for about 80% of the game, the challenge was evenly balanced and I had a smooth ride with the occasional bump here and there. But then there are these sections that require you to use anything and everything at your disposal to get through. And even then it's still hard as hell. But let me tell you, even with all the jank and the clunkiness, nothing feels better than giving your character the power of force lightning and barbecue an entire squad of enemy droids by the click of a button. Maybe that's the dark side in me speaking, but that shit doesn't get old, even 40 hours into the game. Speaking of game length, you do need some patience to get to the finish line. I installed the Sith Lord's Restored Content modification via the Steam Workshop, which adds a lot of content to the base game. For my semi-completionist playthrough, I took about 45 hours. This is a suitable length for an RPG if it is paced evenly and engagingly for the entire experience. However, the pacing of this game is all over the place. It starts super slow by throwing you into a 6 to 7 hour intro level where your main objective is to explore and ultimately flee a space mining facility. There is little to no tension here. There's even a mod that lets you skip this section, and for a good reason. This segment introduces the systems of the game, lets you interact with your first set of characters, and lays the foundation for things to come. It could also be cut in half and nothing of value would be lost. Much later in the game, there's a rescue mission that starts off fairly traditionally and then derails into this lengthy, absurd mess that just would not end. I felt like losing my mind here. And then there's the final stretch of the game, which, without giving too much away, feels so drawn out and unnecessary, it really taints the otherwise great finale. This game isn't perfect. It's honestly far from it. You see where the developers had to cut corners, and I can only imagine how much lesser of an experience it would have been to play this without the TSLR CM mod. But even with all this content restored, I have my fair share of criticisms. The gameplay is janky, the pacing is just wild, there are still some glitches to be found on occasion, and even story-wise, not all plotlines are resolved in a satisfying way. But it is such an ambitious game, and it delivers on so many fronts that I can forgive these weaknesses. It's a game that made me ponder fundamental philosophical themes. It's a game that touched me. It's a game that made me question. Was I deafened, or could I hear at last? Was I broken, or was I whole? Was I blinded, or did I see at last? Thank you for your attention.